Tom Riley had been pushing the same cleaning cart down the same hallways for 7 years now. Every night, the corridors of orbital station Kepler 9 looked the same. Sterile white panels. Soft blue emergency lighting. The quiet hum of life support systems doing their job. He liked the night shift. No crowds. No small talk. Just him, his music player, and the simple rhythm of keeping things clean. Tonight started like any other Tuesday. Tom clocked in at 10, grabbed his cart from storage, and headed toward the embassy wing. That's where the fancy quarters were. Where diplomats and alien delegates stayed when they had business with the station council. Usually pretty quiet up there. But not tonight. Tom heard it before he even turned the corner. A sound that made his stomach drop. Screaming. Not adult screaming. Kid screaming. That particular high-pitched wail that went straight through your skull and grabbed something deep in your chest. He'd heard that sound before. Years ago. When his own kids were little and something was really, truly wrong. He picked up his pace, cartwheels squeaking on the polished floor. When he reached the alien quarters, he found a scene that looked like controlled chaos. 3 security officers stood outside a sealed door, their faces tense. Station Security Chief Miller was there too, talking rapidly into his communicator. Behind the door, the screaming continued. Loud. Desperate. Relentless. Tom stopped his cart and watched. The sound was coming from the quarters assigned to some alien species he couldn't pronounce. He'd seen them around. Tall folks. Sort of cat-like but not really. They had these glowing patterns on their skin that changed colors. Pretty impressive. The station called them the VRYNN, or something close to that. What's going on? Tom asked, keeping his distance. Miller looked up, frustrated. Ambassadors down in medical. Some kind of metabolic shutdown. His mate died during their journey here weeks back. Now we've got 3 cubs in there, and they won't stop crying. Every time we try to approach, they go crazy. The automated care systems can't calm them down, and the nearest VRYNN specialist is 4 hours out. Tom peered at the door. Through the small window, he could see movement. Small shapes huddled in the corner. The crying hadn't stopped. If anything, it was getting worse. That sound that meant a kid had been crying so long they were running out of steam. Getting tired. Getting scared. How long they been like this? Tom asked. 6 hours, one of the security officers said, looking exhausted just from listening. We've tried everything the protocols tell us to try. Food. Water. Temperature adjustments. Nothing works. They're terrified. Tom knew that feeling. He remembered when his wife Linda passed. Car accident. 1 minute she was there, next minute she wasn't. His kids had been 8 and 6. For weeks, they'd had nightmares. His daughter Katie would wake up screaming, and nothing worked except him being there. Just sitting next to her bed. Sometimes holding her hand. Sometimes just being in the room so she knew she wasn't alone. Kids were kids. Didn't matter if they had 2 legs or 4. Didn't matter if they glowed in the dark or spoke a language you couldn't understand. When they were scared, they needed someone. Not something. Not a machine or a protocol or a system. Someone. Tom watched Miller pace back and forth, still talking to someone on his communicator about specialists and protocols and proper procedures. The crying behind the door had changed pitch now. Getting weaker. More desperate. That sound meant they were giving up. Shutting down. Let me try, Tom said. Not loud. Just clear. Miller stopped pacing. What? Let me in there. Let me try. Mr. Riley, those are VRYNN cubs. They're considered a dangerous species. Those claws aren't just for show. The regulations clearly state. I raised 2 kids by myself for 12 years, Tom interrupted. I know what scared sounds like. And those kids in there? They're not dangerous. They're terrified. Miller started to protest again, but Tom was already stepping toward the door controls. One of the security officers moved to block him, but Miller held up a hand. You go in there, it's on you, Miller said. Anything happens, I've got 3 witnesses that say I warned you. Tom nodded. Fair enough. His hand hovered over the door release for just a second. Behind that door were 3 alien kids who'd lost everything. Their mom was gone. Their dad was unconscious in a hospital bed. They were alone in a strange place where nobody spoke their language and everything smelled wrong and felt wrong and sounded wrong. Yeah. Tom knew exactly how that felt. He pressed the button. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The crying got instantly louder. Tom took a breath, stepped through, and let the door close behind him. The first thing that hit Tom when the door sealed behind him was the sound. Inside the room, without the dampening of the walls, the crying was almost physical. It pressed against his ears and made his head throb. 3 small shapes huddled in the far corner, their bodies pressed together, and they were making a noise that no translation software could properly capture. It was raw fear. Tom's instinct was to move toward them. To help. But he'd learned a long time ago that scared things don't want you rushing at them. He'd learned that from a stray dog that used to hang around his old apartment building. The more you chased it, the more it ran. But if you sat down and waited, eventually curiosity won over fear. So Tom Saturday. Right there on the floor, about 15 feet from the cubs. He didn't move toward them. Didn't reach out. Didn't make any sudden gestures. He just folded his legs and made himself as small and unthreatening as a 6-foot human could manage. The cubs went quiet for maybe 3 seconds. Just long enough to process this new weird thing that had entered their space. Then the hissing started. It was a sound like steam escaping from a pipe, but with a growl underneath it. The 3 of them spread out slightly, making themselves look bigger. Their small claws extended, maybe 2 inches long, curved and sharp. Their glowing patterns flashed bright red. Tom could see them clearly now. They stood on 4 legs, about the size of medium dogs, but their body structure was different. More flexible. Their faces were almost cat-like but flatter. And those patterns on their skin, the bioluminescent markings, were pulsing fast and angry. He didn't need a translator to know what that meant. "Okay," Tom said quietly, not expecting them to understand the words. "Okay. I hear you. You're scared. That's all right." The hissing continued. The largest of the 3, probably the oldest, stepped forward slightly. Protective. Tom recognized that too. His son Jake had done the same thing when they were kids. Always putting himself between his little sister and anything that might be a threat. Even when the threat was just the neighbor's loud dog or a stranger at the grocery store. Tom didn't move. He just sat there, watching them, letting them watch him. And then he started to hum. No words. He didn't know any words they'd understand anyway. Just a melody. An old song Linda used to sing when the kids couldn't sleep. He couldn't remember all the words anymore, but the tune was burned into his memory. Slow. Steady. Repetitive. At first, nothing changed. The cubs kept hissing, kept their defensive positions. But Tom noticed the smallest one's ears, or whatever counted as ears on a VR winner, they twitched. Rotated slightly toward him. Still scared, but listening. Tom kept humming. Same tune. Over and over. His voice wasn't great. Never had been. But it was calm. It was steady. It was something that wasn't a threat. The smallest cub stopped hissing first. Its mouth closed, though its body stayed tense. The glowing patterns on its skin shifted from angry red to a flickering orange. The other 2 noticed and glanced at their sibling, confused maybe, but still on guard. While he hummed, Tom looked around the room. The place was a mess. Food packets scattered on the floor. Water spilled near what looked like a sleeping area. And it was cold. Not freezing, but definitely cool. The temperature display on the wall showed 62 degrees. Tom remembered reading somewhere in the station manual that different species had different environmental needs. These cubs were huddled together partly for comfort, sure, but also for warmth. Their home planet was probably a lot hotter than what the station's default settings provided. Moving slowly, still humming, Tom reached for the environmental controls on the wall panel near him. The cubs tensed, watching his every movement. He tapped the temperature up. 70 degrees. Then 75. Then 80. He watched their reaction. At 85, the smallest cub's body relaxed just a little. Tom pushed it to 90 and left it there. The change wasn't immediate, but within a couple of minutes, Tom could see the difference. The cubs weren't shivering anymore. That desperate edge to their body language softened slightly. Next was food. Tom could see the packets on the floor. Standard nutrition units. The kind the station dispensed for most species. Technically edible. Technically balanced. But completely joyless. He tried one once out of curiosity and it had tasted like cardboard mixed with vitamins. Tom picked up one of the packets, moving slowly, keeping his body language open and non-threatening. The cubs watched him but didn't hiss. He tore open the packet and looked at the contents. Some kind of protein gel. It was cold. Right out of the dispenser, straight onto the floor. No wonder they weren't eating. He held the packet between his hands, warming it. The station air might be 90 degrees now, but the food was still cold. He rubbed his palms together, generating friction, letting his body heat transfer to the packet. It took a couple of minutes. The cubs watched, fascinated maybe, by this strange ritual. When the packet felt warm, Tom set it down on the floor between himself and the cubs. Then he slid it slowly toward them, keeping his movements visible and predictable. The packet stopped about 3 feet from their position. The oldest cub snarled. Low and warning. Don't come closer. This is our space. Tom pulled his hand back and returned to his sitting position. He kept humming. Kept waiting. Hunger is a powerful motivator. Tom knew that from experience. You can be scared, but eventually, your body demands fuel. The smallest cub crept forward first. One careful step. Then another. Eyes locked on Tom, ready to bolt at any sudden movement. Tom stayed perfectly still. Just humming his quiet tune. The cub reached the packet. Sniffed it. Then took a tiny, cautious bite. Its eyes widened slightly. The warm food clearly tasted better than the cold packets they'd been ignoring. It took another bite. Then another. Faster now. The other two watched. Then hunger overrode caution. They moved forward together, joining their sibling at the packet. All 3 eating. Their desperate cries had faded to soft whimpers between bites. Tom smiled. Small victory. But a victory nonetheless. Tom had lost track of time. The room had no windows, and his watch had died sometime during the 2nd hour. He'd warmed 4 more food packets. He gathered every blanket and soft material he could find in the living quarters and piled them into something that looked like a nest. It reminded him of the blanket forts his kids used to build in the living room on rainy weekends. The cubs had slowly, carefully, moved closer to him. The smallest one was the bravest. After eating, it had inched forward until it was almost touching Tom's leg. Then it had simply collapsed there, exhausted from hours of crying. The middle one had followed soon after, curling up against Tom's other side. Their body heat was intense, like having heating pads pressed against him, but Tom didn't move. Didn't want to break whatever fragile trust had been built. The oldest cub, the protective one, still kept its distance. It sat about 5 feet away, watching Tom with those large eyes that seemed to catch and reflect the dim room lighting. Every time Tom shifted position, even slightly, those eyes tracked the movement. Guardian. Protector. Not ready to trust yet, but not attacking either. Tom had started talking to them. Quiet, calm words about nothing important. He told them about his kids. About how Jake used to be afraid of thunderstorms and would sleep in the hallway outside Tom's bedroom door because he was too proud to admit he was scared. About how Katie had a stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere until she was 10. The cubs didn't understand the words, but they seemed to respond to the tone. The rhythm of human speech. The sound of someone just being present. He was in the middle of a story about the time Jake tried to cook breakfast and nearly set the kitchen on fire when the door suddenly opened. Tom looked up, squinting against the brighter light from the corridor. 2 figures stood silhouetted in the doorway. The cubs immediately tensed. The 2 sleeping against him woke with small chirping sounds of alarm. The oldest one jumped to its feet, positioning itself between Tom and the door, and that hissing started again. It's okay, Tom said quickly, keeping his voice steady. It's okay. They're not here to hurt you. Station Commander Davis stepped into the room first, and Tom had to stop himself from laughing at the expression on her face. She looked like someone who'd walked into the wrong movie. Her mouth actually hung open slightly as she took in the scene. Tom, sitting in a pile of blankets on the floor. 2 alien cubs pressed against him like puppies. The 3rd standing guard. Behind her came a tall thin man carrying what looked like a medical scanner and several pieces of equipment Tom didn't recognize. He had the look of a scientist. That particular combination of fascination and caution. Mr. Riley, Commander Davis said, and her tone had that special quality that people in charge use when they're about to tell you everything you did wrong. Do you have any idea how many safety protocols you're currently violating? Tom looked down at the small warm bodies pressed against him. One of them was making a soft purring sound. A lot, I'm guessing. 17, Davis said. I counted. 17 separate violations. Unauthorized entry into restricted quarters. Unauthorized contact with potentially dangerous alien species. Unauthorized adjustment of environmental controls. Unauthorized. Commander, the specialist interrupted, stepping forward carefully, his eyes locked on the cubs. Commander, please. Look at this. I am looking at this, Dr. Phillips. I'm looking at a janitor who decided station regulations don't apply to him. No, really look. Phillips moved slowly, keeping his movements visible. The oldest cub growled low, but didn't attack. These cubs have bonded with him. Do you see the way they are positioned? The body language? The bioluminescent patterns. Tom looked down. The glowing markings on the two cubs beside him were pulsing in slow, steady rhythms. Not the angry red from before. A soft blue-green. Almost peaceful. Early-stage crisis bonding, Phillips continued, his voice filled with something like awe. I've only read about this in VRYNN psychological journals. When cubs experience severe trauma and find a source of stability, they can form an immediate attachment bond. It's a survival mechanism. That's wonderful, Davis said flatly. But it doesn't change the fact that. The oldest cub made a sound. Not a hiss or a growl. Something else. It was looking directly at Davis, and the translator unit on Phillips's equipment suddenly crackled to life. The mechanical voice was flat and emotionless, but the words were clear. The soft one stays. Everyone froze. Tom felt the cubs pressed against him shift closer, and he instinctively put his hands on their backs. Steady. Protective. Did that cub just, Davis started. That's the first coherent speech they've produced since the crisis began, Phillips said, typing rapidly on his datapad. The translator couldn't get anything before because they were too distressed. But now. The soft one stays, the cub repeated, more insistent this time. Davis closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Tom recognized that gesture. He'd done it himself plenty of times when his kids were being particularly stubborn about something. It was the universal sign of someone realizing their carefully planned day was about to go completely sideways. Dr. Phillips, she said carefully. What happens if we separate them now? Phillips looked uncomfortable. Psychological damage. Possibly severe. The cubs have already experienced the loss of their mother and the sudden incapacitation of their father. If we remove their new attachment figure, especially this soon after the bond has formed, we could be looking at complete emotional shutdown. They might stop eating entirely. Stop communicating. So what you're telling me, Davis said slowly, is that our night shift janitor has accidentally become essential to the psychological well-being of 3 alien dignitaries' children. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Tom tried to stand up, moving carefully so he wouldn't disturb the cubs too much. Look, I can stay a bit longer if. Both cubs that had been sleeping against him immediately started making distressed sounds. High-pitched and urgent. They pressed against his legs, and their glowing patterns flickered rapidly between colors. Tom sat back down. The crying stopped immediately. Well, Davis said, pulling out her communicator. This is going to be a fun report to file. Dr. Phillips, how long until the cubs' family can get here? The nearest VRYNN relatives are at least 3 weeks away, even at maximum jump speed. The ambassador is stable but unconscious. Could be days before he wakes. Davis stared at Tom. Tom stared back. The cubs chirped softly, content in their makeshift nest. Mr. Riley, Davis finally said. How do you feel about a temporary change in job duties? They moved Tom into the quarters with the cubs. Not officially, of course. Officially, he was on temporary specialized assignment pending resolution of diplomatic situation. Unofficially, everyone on the station knew Tom Riley the janitor had somehow become a babysitter to 3 alien kids, and nobody quite knew what to do about it. The first 24 hours were the hardest. Tom thought he'd known tired. He'd worked double shifts. He'd stayed up all night when Jake had the flu and wouldn't stop throwing up. He'd powered through on 3 hours of sleep more times than he could count. But this was different. This was a whole new level of exhausted. The cubs didn't sleep like humans. Dr. Phillips had explained it, using words Tom only half understood. Something about their natural sleep cycles being polyphasic, which apparently meant they slept in short bursts throughout the day and night instead of one long stretch. 20 minutes asleep. 40 minutes awake. An hour asleep. 2 hours awake. No pattern. No predictability. Just chaos. Every time Tom started to drift off, one of them would wake up. And if one woke up crying or scared, the other 2 would wake up too. It was like having newborn triplets, except these newborns had claws and occasionally forgot that human skin was softer than their own. Dr. Phillips kept coming by with new information. The cubs needed specific minerals in their diet. Calcium, but not the kind humans used. Something called xelthium that the station had to synthesize specially. They needed their sleeping area at exactly 92 degrees. Not 90, not 95. 92. Their skin was sensitive to certain types of light, so Tom had to adjust the room's illumination 3 times before he got it right. And then there was the communication issue. VRYNN cubs didn't just use sound. They used those glowing patterns on their skin like a second language. Happy was blue-green and steady. Scared was red and flickering. Hungry was yellow and pulsing. But there were dozens of other patterns Tom couldn't figure out without help. The station provided him with a special visor, a clunky piece of equipment that looked like old virtual reality goggles. It was supposed to translate the light patterns into words he could understand. Supposed to. Half the time it just gave him error messages or translations that made no sense. The small one expresses coastal feelings. What the hell did that even mean? But Tom learned. Not from the visor. From watching. From paying attention. The smallest cub, the one Tom had started calling Pip in his head because he needed some way to tell them apart, would do this little spiral pattern on its back when it wanted to be picked up. The middle one, who Tom thought of as Patch because of an irregular spot in her markings, would go very still and dim when she was about to have a nightmare. And the oldest, the protective one Tom called Striker, had this way of checking things that reminded Tom so much of Jake it hurt. Striker checked everything. Every door. Every window. Every seal and vent and corner of the room. Before the cubs would settle down to sleep, Striker had to make a complete circuit. And not just once. Tom counted. 17 times. Exactly 17. Every single time. Door, window, vent, corner, door, window, vent, corner. Over and over. If Tom tried to hurry it along or suggest maybe 16 times was enough, Striker would start the count over from the beginning. Dr. Phillips said it was trauma response. Cubs who'd lost a parent often developed obsessive safety behaviors. Tom just called it what it was. Striker was scared the universe would take something else away, so he was trying to control what he could. Tom got that. After Linda died, he checked the locks on all the doors every night for a year. Made sure the smoke detectors had fresh batteries every month. Called his kids 3 times a day when they were at school just to hear their voices. You couldn't logic away that kind of fear. You just had to ride it out. Patch's nightmares were worse. She'd be sleeping fine, curled up in the nest, and then suddenly she'd start thrashing. Her patterns would strobe bright and chaotic. She'd make these sounds, not quite crying, more like distress calls. The first time it happened, Tom had panicked, thinking something was physically wrong. But Dr. Phillips had explained. Night terrors. Common in traumatized young. The only thing that helped was Tom's hand on her back. Just resting there. Steady pressure. Warm and present. Within a minute, the thrashing would stop. The patterns would calm. She'd settle back into sleep like nothing had happened. Tom had done the same thing for Katie when she was small. Some things were universal. And Pip, the smallest, just wanted to be held. All the time. Even though VRYNN cubs weren't usually carried after a certain age. Even though Dr. Phillips said it might slow down Pip's independence development. Tom didn't care. The kid wanted to be held, so Tom held him. Simple as that. He carried Pip around the quarters while doing everything one-handed. Warming food. Adjusting blankets. Checking the environmental controls. Pip would wrap his 4 legs around Tom's torso and just hang there, purring that soft rumbling sound, and Tom's back would ache but he didn't put him down. Word got around the station fast. Humans were terrible gossips, and apparently that trait extended to every other species too. By day 3, Tom started getting visitors. Not official ones. Just people showing up at the door with things. A crew member from the Zenthi delegation, a species that looked kind of like 7-foot-tall birds, brought 3 smooth stones that radiated heat. She didn't speak much standard, but she gestured at the cub's nest and then at the stones. Tom placed them in the corners of the sleeping area, and the cubs immediately gravitated toward them. Better than heating elements. Natural and warm. 2 days later, one of the Corvin showed up. They were the reptilian species, usually kept to themselves, kind of intimidating with their scaled skin and cold eyes. This one was carrying a container of something that looked like raw meat but smelled spicy. He set it down just inside the door and left without a word. Dr. Phillips analyzed it later and confirmed it was perfectly safe. Some kind of protein the Corvin hunted on their homeworld, prepared exactly the way young carnivores needed it. The cubs devoured it. A human engineer Tom had never met brought toys. Simple things. Balls that bounced. Soft fabrics in different textures. A puzzle made of interlocking shapes. The woman just smiled and said she had kids back home and knew how hard it was. Nobody made a big deal about it. Nobody gave speeches. They just saw someone struggling to take care of kids and decided to help. Species didn't seem to matter much when it came to that. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for the VRYNN family to arrive. 21 days of broken sleep, mineral supplements, temperature adjustments, and learning to read emotions in glowing patterns. 21 days of Tom living in those quarters, barely seeing the outside, becoming part of a strange little family that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Tom had lost weight. He could feel it in how his uniform hung loose around his waist. His face looked different in the mirror, older somehow, with dark circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. Not that he was getting much sleep anyway. He'd maybe managed 4 solid hours in the last week. His back hurt from sleeping on the floor. His hands had small scars from the time Striker's claws had accidentally caught him during play. He smelled like the cubs, that weird spicy sweet scent that VRYN gave off. But the cubs were thriving. That's what mattered. Dr. Phillips had been documenting everything, amazed at their progress. Striker was talking more, trying to learn human words even though his mouth wasn't built for them. Tom came out sounding like Tom with a weird clicking sound at the end. Food was fooder. The cubs thought it was hilarious when Tom tried to teach them earth animal names. Dog was impossible. Cat came out as something that sounded like a sneeze. Pip had started exploring. Not far, never more than a few feet from Tom, but he'd actually put himself down and walked around on his own. Played with the toys the engineer had brought. Even tried to climb on the furniture, though his legs were still a bit wobbly. And Patch. Patch had started teaching. A human kid from the station, daughter of one of the dock workers, had been allowed to visit under supervision. Her name was Beth, and she was maybe 6 years old with missing front teeth and more curiosity than sense. Patch had been nervous at first, hiding behind Tom's leg. But then Beth had asked about the glowing patterns, and something clicked. For 20 minutes, Tom and the supervising parent watched as Patch slowly showed Beth how the colors worked. Blue for happy. Red for scared. Yellow for hungry. Beth tried to copy them with a light-up toy she'd brought, and Patch had made this chittering sound that the translator said meant laughter. When Beth left, she'd hugged Patch goodbye. Just wrapped her little human arms around the alien cub like it was the most natural thing in the world. Patch had gone bright blue for 10 minutes straight. Tom was in the middle of teaching all 3 cubs a simple game with a softball when the alert came through. The VRYN ship had arrived. Family was here. The ambassador's sister was coming to get the cubs. His stomach dropped. Which was stupid. He'd known this was temporary. Known they'd leave eventually. That was the whole point. Keep them safe until their family came. Mission accomplished. Job done. He should feel relieved. So why did his chest hurt? He kept playing with the cubs. Kept everything normal. Even as he heard voices in the corridor outside. Even as the door opened and suddenly the room was full of very tall, very imposing adult VRYN. 5 of them. All watching Tom like they were trying to solve a complicated equation. The largest one stepped forward. Female, Tom guessed, though he still wasn't entirely sure how to tell. She was almost 7 feet tall, her markings more elaborate than the cubs, pulsing in complex patterns Tom's visor couldn't fully translate. Her presence filled the room. This was someone important. Someone powerful. Tom stood up, trying to look professional despite wearing a 3-week-old uniform and having Pip attached to his leg. The cubs had gone quiet, staring at the newcomers. Striker positioned himself partially in front of his siblings. Protective even now. The matriarch's eyes swept the room. Tom tried to see it through her perspective. The nest of blankets on the floor. The heat stones in the corners. The toys scattered around. The learning charts Dr. Phillips had made, showing human words next to VRYN concepts. The cape made from Tom's spare uniform shirt that Pip insisted on wearing while pretending to be what the translator called a sky hunter. She looked at the cubs. Really looked. Striker was standing tall but calm. Pip was peeking out from behind Tom's leg, cape still on, curious instead of terrified. Patch was holding the ball, her patterns showing nervous but stable blue-green. Then the matriarch looked at Tom. Her eyes were large and golden, and there was an intelligence there that made him feel like she was reading his entire life story in one glance. Tom, Striker said suddenly, his small voice clear in the silent room. Tom, stay? Something in Tom's chest cracked. Buddy, your family's here. They're going to take you home. Tom, stay? Striker repeated, more insistent. Patch moved closer, pressing against Tom's other leg. Pip's cape wearing had stopped being cute and started being heartbreaking. The matriarch made a sound. Low and resonant. She moved forward, and Tom's first instinct was to step back, but he held his ground. She was massive up close. Could break him without trying. Instead, she lowered herself. Bent down until she was at Tom's eye level, which meant she was practically kneeling on the floor. Among the VRYN, Dr. Phillips had mentioned once, that was a gesture of profound respect. Reserved for elders. For heroes. She reached out one clawed hand, placed it gently over her own chest, then extended it to touch Tom's. Her palm was warm. The touch was surprisingly gentle. "You are named King Keeper," she said, and the translator caught it perfectly this time. "The highest honor we give to those who guard our young when we cannot. My brother's cubs know your heartbeat now. They carry your scent. They speak your words. This debt cannot be repaid. It can only be honored." Tom didn't know what to say. Didn't trust his voice. So he just nodded. The matriarch straightened up and removed something from a pouch at her side. A small pin, made of what looked like polished bone or crystal. It showed 3 small claws wrapped around a larger one. She pressed it into Tom's hand. "You will always be family," she said simply. The cubs went home. Tom went back to his cart and his night shifts. But on his uniform, next to his name badge, he wore that pin. And sometimes, late at night when the station was quiet, he'd remember 3 small bodies pressed against him and think that maybe, just maybe, he'd done something that mattered.